I was an ATM for my family for 30 years. When I stopped giving money, they disappeared, until my nephew called at 3 a.m. Hello, Reddit. I never thought I'd be sharing this story, but after reading so many similar accounts here, I felt that perhaps my experience could help someone in the same situation. Warning, this is a long post. I'm 58 years old, single, childless, and I've built a successful career as an executive at a multinational company. I've worked hard my entire life, invested my money wisely, and yes, I've managed to accumulate considerable wealth. I'm not a millionaire, but I live comfortably, without financial worries, in a beautiful house in an upscale neighborhood, drive a new car, and can travel whenever I want. I come from a lower middle-class family. My parents struggled to provide education for me and my 3 siblings, but I was the only one who completed college. While I was studying and working simultaneously, my siblings chose different paths. Their lives weren't easy, always struggling to pay bills, frequently changing jobs, marrying young, and having children without planning. In total, I have 7 nieces and nephews. Ashley and Brandon, children of my sister Martha, Chloe, Dylan, and Ethan, children of my brother Paul, and Fiona and Greg, children of my brother Richard. They all grew up seeing me as the rich aunt, the businesswoman aunt, the aunt who travels internationally. And for many years, I fed this image. I was always the generous aunt. At birthday parties, my gifts were the most expensive. At Christmas, I arrived with shopping bags. When they needed something special, a course, a musical instrument, a laptop for college, they came to me. For high school graduations, I paid for parties. When they got into university, I gave them cars. I lent money to my siblings when they needed to renovate their homes or were in debt. I helped with medical treatments, financed trips. For a long time, I convinced myself that this was my way of contributing to the family. Since God didn't give me children, I tried, but discovered I have a congenital condition that prevents me from getting pregnant. I thought I could help raise my nieces and nephews, giving them opportunities their parents couldn't provide. But over time, I noticed a disturbing pattern. The phone only rang when they needed something. Let me give you some examples so you understand how things worked. Ashley, my oldest niece, now 32, rarely called to see how I was doing. But when she wanted to study abroad in college, suddenly she started visiting me every week. She talked about how wonderful it would be for her career, how she'd return fluent in English, how this experience would change her life. Of course, I ended up paying for the exchange program, $17,000. When she returned, I barely received a postcard. The call stopped. She only reached out again 3 years later when she wanted to buy an apartment and needed help with the down payment. Brandon called me exactly 5 times in the last 4 years. All 5 times it was to ask for money, to buy a motorcycle, to renovate his room when his wife was pregnant, to pay credit card debts, to help with his son's dental treatment, and recently to invest in a promising business, which I later discovered was a pyramid scheme. Chloe and Dylan considered me a kind of student bank. When they were in college, I was the best aunt in the world. I paid tuition, books, equipment, apartment rent near the university. Chloe once called me crying because she urgently needed a new MacBook for her design work. I bought it. 2 weeks later, I saw photos of her on a beach trip with friends. Apparently, the money she saved by not buying the computer went to beer and hotels. Ethan, who was always my favorite when he was a child, only contacted me for loans that were never repaid. The last time was for his dream wedding, $40,000. On the invitation, the bride's parents were mentioned as the hosts. My name? Nowhere to be found. Fiona called me exactly 3 times last year. The first time she wanted money for plastic surgery. Auntie, it's for my self-esteem. The second time, for a new car because hers was falling apart, a 3-year-old Honda Civic. The third time to pay for a specialization course. She always started with, Auntie E, it's been so long. I've been dying to see you. Greg was perhaps the most honest. He simply sent messages. Aunt, I need some cash. Can you help me? No beating around the bush, no pretending to be interested in my life. Meanwhile, at family events, I heard comments like, it's easy for you, you have money, or you don't know how hard it is to raise children, or even, you're lucky you don't have to worry about bills. As if my life had been one big lottery win, not the result of decades of hard work, overtime, social sacrifices, risky investments, and difficult decisions. And the worst part, none of them seemed genuinely interested in me as a person. They never asked about my work, my hobbies, my travels, except to say, "Wow, must be nice to have money to travel." Nobody asked about my health, my friends, my dreams. To them, I was just the bank aunt, a walking ATM with a smile on my face. The moment I realized I needed to change was on my 55th birthday, 3 years ago. I decided to have a small celebration at home. Nothing extravagant, just a dinner for the family. I sent invitations 3 weeks in advance. On the day, I prepared everything with care. I hired a caterer, decorated the house, bought fine drinks. I was excited to gather everyone and celebrate. The party was scheduled for 7 p.m. By 7:30 p.m., no one had arrived. By 8 p.m., I received messages with excuses. My sister Martha couldn't come because Ashley had an unavoidable commitment, and she needed to stay with her grandson. Paul claimed he was too tired from work. Richard said his children had other plans and he didn't want to come alone. I sat at the set table, alone, looking at the empty chairs. The food getting cold, the birthday cake untouched. That's when it hit me. To my family, I only mattered when they could get something material from me. That night, I cried like I hadn't cried in years. Not from sadness, but from anger. Anger at myself for allowing myself to be used for so long, for buying my family's love instead of demanding it naturally. The next day, I made a decision. I would disappear from their lives. Not dramatically, with confrontations or accusations. I would simply distance myself. I wouldn't answer calls asking for money anymore. I wouldn't finance others' dreams. I wouldn't be the family bank anymore. I wanted to see how long it would take for someone to notice my absence, for someone to genuinely worry about me, not about what I could provide. I canceled my traditional monthly Sunday lunch where everyone came to my house. Curiously, this was the only family event that never failed, perhaps because I always gave surprise gifts at the end. I changed my phone number, keeping the old one only for messages. I created a new email that I shared only with close friends and work colleagues. On social media, I restricted my family's access to my posts. When I received messages asking for money, I politely responded that it wouldn't be possible to help at the moment. For loan requests, I said I had long-term investments and no liquidity. To avoid meetings on commemorative dates, I planned trips. That Christmas, I went to Iceland to see the Northern Lights, something I'd always wanted to do. On my mother's birthday, she passed away 12 years ago, but we always celebrated. I was at a meditation retreat in Thailand with my phone turned off. It wasn't a total withdrawal. If someone really needed me, a medical emergency, a serious problem, I would be there. But I was no longer available to be the family bank. I also started investing in myself in ways I had never done before. I hired a personal trainer. I started French classes. I joined a book club. I adopted a dog, Toby, a golden retriever who became my shadow. I made new friendships. I even started a relationship with a retired university professor I met at the bookstore. In short, I built a life that didn't revolve around being the family's rich aunt. As expected, the first few months were filled with confused messages. "Aunt, are you okay? You haven't been coming to lunches." "Aunt, did you change your number? I'm trying to reach you." "Aunt, we need to talk about that help I mentioned." I responded vaguely. I was traveling. I was busy with work. I was at a retreat. Always polite, never accusatory, just unavailable. The reactions varied. Ashley was clearly irritated. When she needed money for a postgraduate program and I gently refused, she sent a passive-aggressive message. I thought family was supposed to support each other, but fine, I'll figure it out. Brandon was more direct. "Aunt, what's going on? You've always helped us. Why are you being so different now?" Chloe and Dylan simply stopped contacting me when they realized the tap had dried up. Ethan sent a message saying he was worried about me, that I didn't seem like myself. I asked if he wanted to come over for coffee to talk in person. He never responded. Fiona sent several messages about how much she missed me, how she wanted to see me. When I suggested lunch, making it clear it would just be to talk, no gifts or money involved, she always had commitments. Greg, always direct, asked me, "Aunt, are you broke? If that's it, we understand. Just tell us." As if the only possible reason for me not giving money was that I had lost everything. My siblings surprised me the most. Instead of concern, I noticed something close to relief. as if a burden had been lifted from them. The burden of having to include me in family things just to maintain the financial flow. Martha even commented, in one of the few times we spoke, "I think it's good you're living your life, sis. You've always worried too much about us." I almost laughed. Worrying was what they called being financially exploited. After the initial reactions, there was a period of almost total silence. For approximately 6 months, I had virtually no contact with my nieces, nephews, or siblings. No phone calls to see how I was doing, no invitations to family events. No messages saying, "I miss you." Nothing. This period was simultaneously painful and liberating. Painful because it confirmed my suspicions. I really was just a bank to them. Without money involved, there was no interest in maintaining a relationship. Liberating because I could finally live without the constant pressure of being the family's financial savior. Without the guilt of having more than the others. Without the resentment of being valued only for my money. During these months, I traveled more than in the previous 5 years. I met fascinating people. I read dozens of books. I redecorated my house. I took a photography course. I started swimming 3 times a week. I adopted a second dog, Frida, an adorable mixed breed who makes Toby very happy. I also allowed myself to process the grief for the family I thought I had. It was as if I was grieving for people who were still alive, but who never existed the way I imagined. One night, during a session with my therapist, yes, I finally sought professional help, she asked me, "Have you considered that you might have contributed to this dynamic?" I became defensive. "What do you mean? I just wanted to help." "Exactly," she replied. "You found your value in the family by being the provider, the bank. Perhaps, unconsciously, you appreciated this role because it gave you a purpose, a place of prominence." That hit me like lightning. She was right. Part of me liked being the rich aunt. I liked the effusive thanks, even if self-interested. I liked being needed, even if it was just for my money. It was a two-way street. They were financially exploiting me, yes. But I was also using my money as a way to buy affection and family relevance. This revelation was crucial for my healing. It wasn't just about them changing, I needed to change too. The family silence was broken by a call in the middle of the night about 7 months after I withdrew. It was Brandon, my nephew. He was crying. "Aunt, it's Tommy. Tommy is his son, my great-nephew who's 5 years old." My heart froze. "What happened, Brandon?" I asked, already looking for my car keys. "He's in the hospital. Acute pneumonia. He's in the ICU." "I'm on my way," I said without hesitation. During the drive to the hospital, I thought he would probably call asking for money for the treatment. I mentally prepared myself to help. A child's health is above any lesson I wanted to teach the family, but also to clarify boundaries. To my surprise, when I arrived at the hospital, Brandon seemed genuinely surprised to see me. "Aunt, you really came?" "Of course I came. How's Tommy?" "Stabilizing. The doctors are optimistic, but he needs to stay in the ICU for a few days." I hugged my nephew, who broke down in tears in my arms. I realized he wasn't just worried about his son, he was exhausted. He and his wife Anna had been at the hospital for 2 days. They weren't showering properly, were eating poorly, sleeping in uncomfortable chairs. "You two need to rest," I said. "Go to my house, take a shower, sleep for a few hours. I'll stay with Tommy." "We can't leave him," Anna protested. "He's sedated now. He won't notice. And you need to be strong when he wakes up." Reluctantly, they accepted. I gave them the key to my house and stayed with Tommy. I sat beside his bed, watching his small body connected to machines, his assisted breathing, his pale skin. As I watched over his sleep, I had time to think. This child was not to blame for the toxic dynamics in our family. At that moment, I vowed to be different with this new generation. I would be a constant presence, not just financial. I would be the great aunt that Tommy and the other children deserved. When Brandon and Anna returned 8 hours later, they looked like different people. Rested, showered, fed. Brandon hugged me again. "Thank you, Aunt. Not just for taking care of Tommy, but for everything. I know I haven't been a good nephew. That was the first time in years I felt a genuine connection with a family member. Tommy's illness, fortunately, did not last long. After a week in the hospital, he was discharged. During this period, I took turns with Brandon and Anna in caring for him. I brought home-cooked food, toys for when he got better, magazines for the parents to distract themselves during the vigil. At no point did Brandon mention money. When I offered to help with hospital expenses, he refused. "We have health insurance, Aunt, and I managed to save some money in the last few months. We're covered." That surprised me. Maybe my nephew was maturing. When Tommy had recovered, I invited Brandon and his family for lunch at my house. During the meal, he asked me why I had distanced myself. It was the first time anyone had asked directly. I felt that my only value to the family was financial. I answered honestly. The phone only rang when someone needed money. No one was interested in me as a person. Brandon was silent for a moment, then looked down, ashamed. "You're right, Aunt. I myself only called when I needed help. And afterward, I didn't even thank you properly." He took an envelope from his pocket. "That's why I brought this." Inside the envelope was a check, partial but significant, to start repaying the money from the loan for the motorcycle. "I can't return it all at once, but I'll pay back every cent, Aunt, with interest." That moment was a turning point. Not for the money itself, which, honestly, I never expected to get back, but for the gesture. For the first time, a nephew was acknowledging the problem and trying to do something about it. News of my constant presence during Tommy's hospitalization spread through the family, and slowly, something began to change. Martha, my sister, called me. "Can we have coffee? Just the two of us?" At the meeting, she apologized for years of self-interested behavior. "I always thought you were okay with it, that it was your way of participating since you have money and we don't. I never thought we were hurting you." Chloe invited me to attend her end-of-course presentation at design school, a school I paid for, but whose events I had never been invited to before. Afterwards, she showed me her portfolio, asked for professional advice, not financial, listened to my stories about the beginning of my career. It was a normal conversation between aunt and niece without underlying tensions. Dylan, who was going through a complicated divorce, reached out not to ask for money for lawyers, but to talk, to vent. "You've always been good with words, with advice. I need guidance, not cash." Even Ethan, perhaps the most opportunistic of all, came to visit me bringing a gift, a wine he knew I liked. He didn't ask for anything in return, he just wanted to reconnect. Fiona invited me to be the godmother of her newborn son, an important role in the child's life, not just in the wallet. And Greg, always direct, sent me a message. "Aunt, I've been an idiot, for years. Can I take you to dinner and try to fix things?" Each interaction was like removing a layer of hurt accumulated over years. It wasn't perfect, nor immediate. There were relapses. Ethan, for example, couldn't resist and tried to ask me for money on his third visit. When I politely refused, he was visibly irritated. But then, surprisingly, he came back to apologize. "It's a hard habit to break," he admitted. "But I'm trying." In the following months, I established new rules for myself. No loans or expensive gifts. If someone really needed significant financial help, it would be through formal contracts with clear deadlines and conditions. Presents instead of presents. For birthdays, graduations, and other celebrations, I opted for shared experiences instead of fat checks. Tickets to shows we could attend together. A weekend trip to a nearby destination. A course we could take together. Honesty above all. When I felt someone was approaching out of self-interest, I would openly say, "I notice you only reach out when you need something. That hurts me." Valuing reciprocity. I started asking my nieces and nephews for small favors, not out of necessity, but to balance the relationship. I would ask Brandon, who is good with technology, to help me with my computer. I would ask Chloe, the designer, for opinions on my home decor. This gave them the opportunity to contribute, to feel they also had value to me beyond receiving my help. Clear boundaries. No became part of my family vocabulary. And surprisingly, the world didn't end when I said no. The family was still there, perhaps with even more respect. Some relationships improved significantly. Brandon became an attentive and caring nephew. Chloe often called just to chat. Dylan started visiting me regularly, sometimes just to have coffee. Others remained distant. Ashley never really understood my withdrawal. To her, I was still the rich aunt who became stingy. Fiona maintained a superficial cordiality, but it was clear she still saw me as a potential financial resource, not as a person. Greg oscillated between moments of genuine connection and self-interested relapses. And that's okay. I learned that I can't change how people see me or relate to me. I can only establish my boundaries and respect my own values. Update. Today, 3 years after my disappearance from family life, things have found a new balance. My relationship with my nieces and nephews is more real, more authentic. It's not perfect. Family relationships rarely are. But it's healthier. Brandon has been visiting me regularly with Tommy, who is now 8 years old and is in love with Toby and Frida. He's paying back the loan in small but consistent installments. More important than the money is the symbolism of his commitment. Chloe graduated and opened her own design studio. She even created my personal website. Yes, at 58 years old, I decided to have a website to share my travel photos and reflections. She didn't charge for the work. It was her gift to make up for years of being a terrible niece, in her words. Dylan went through his divorce and is rebuilding his life. Sometimes he asks me for financial advice, not money, but guidance on how to manage his finances, invest, plan for the future. It's gratifying to be able to share knowledge, not just resources. Ethan is still Ethan, charming, a bit opportunistic, but at least now he's honest about his intentions. When he needs financial help, he says so clearly. When he just wants company, he also makes that clear. This transparency is already progress. Fiona and I maintain a cordial but distant relationship. She lives in another city now, which makes the emotional distance that naturally developed easier. Greg surprised everyone by getting a scholarship for a master's degree abroad. Before leaving, he thanked me. If you hadn't cut off the tap, Aunt, I probably would never have sought this opportunity. I was too comfortable. As for me, I'm living the best phase of my life. I've partially retired from corporate work. I do some consulting, but I dedicate most of my time to living. I travel. I take photographs. I write. My relationship with Paul, the professor I met at the bookstore, is serious. We're thinking about moving in together. Financially, I decided that part of my fortune will go to a foundation that will create scholarships for low-income youth. Another part will be divided into funds for the education of my great-nieces and nephews, but with clear clauses that the money can only be used for academic or professional training, not for consumption. I've also set aside an amount for health challenges my siblings might face in old age. I don't want them to suffer from lack of medical resources, regardless of how our relationship has been. The rest? I'm spending it on myself, on experiences, on memories, on joy. If you were in her place, what would you have done differently? Leave your comment.